to a very special interview with myself and Katharine Birbalsingh at Michaela. So I've come to visit for the day. Katharine's been amazing because she's agreed to do this little interview with me. And this is part of 3 or 4 interviews I'm doing with school leaders, just to find out a little bit about them, first of all, but also their schools and their philosophy, I suppose, on education and what we can learn. And to be honest with you, I'm doing this purely from a selfish point of view. For me, to find out more about how different schools are operating in different contexts. So, hi everybody, if you're joining us on Periscope or Twitter, and do fire questions through as well, and we'll try, and if we have time at the end, we'll try and answer it. Katharine, we're going to start off with just some kind of more general personal questions. So what's the first thing that you grab in the morning?
A glass of water.
Water?
I know, it's really boring, isn't it? But I don't drink tea or coffee.
Yeah.
And so, I have a big bottle of water. You know, they say you're meant to drink 8 glasses a day. So I drink loads and loads of water all day. Okay. All the time. Okay. Weekends too.
Yeah.
I start with water.
Okay, perfect. And so obviously I've been in Michaela this morning. It's been so interesting. And, you know, obviously you were, at some point you must have been inspired to set up Michaela and to do what you've done. Who is your biggest inspiration?
Well, my father, I'd say, is my biggest inspiration, but not so much to set up the school. In fact, I think my father was horrified when I first announced I wanted to become a teacher.
Yeah.
But he grew up dirt poor in Guyana. You know, he didn't have any shoes. If you look at his feet, they're like hard as rock because he spent his days without shoes when he was a kid. And he managed to get himself to one of the top schools in Guyana, and all the family, clubbed together to get him his uniform and all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then he went to Jamaica and went to university there, and then came to England, and then eventually settled in Canada. And he just, he perseveres, and he came from nothing and gave his 2 daughters, opportunities that they wouldn't have had he not done what he did.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. So, I mean, that makes sense as well from meeting you and seeing the school as well, where that ties together. So, what do you think that people who know you or meet you, what do you think they notice about you?
My hair. Yeah, people always notice my hair. And in fact, if I tie my hair back, I sort of look like a different person, and people don't necessarily recognize me. So they always notice my hair. They notice, I think, probably that I'm a bit loud and a bit kind of crazy. You know, I once said that in an interview. They said, name 3 adjectives to describe you. And I said, well, and I gave one of them as crazy. And when they gave me feedback, because they didn't give me the job, they said, in the future, you really shouldn't describe yourself as crazy.
Excellent.
Yes. I think it's kind of hard to meet me and not think that I am just a little bit, I'm not, when I say I'm crazy, I just mean I'm a little bit radical.
Yeah.
I'll push things to the edge. I question why things are being done a certain way, which makes sense,
It does. And what do you, I suppose this is along a similar line, but what do you hope people notice about you if it's not your hair? Well, it might be your hair as well, but I mean, what do you hope people...
Certainly in this day and age, I hope that people realize that I'm a nice person, because I'm kind of branded as this dragon lady and,
Brent, strictest head teacher.
Strictest head teacher, etc. People kind of think, oh my goodness, who is she? She's going to eat me alive, etc. When actually, I am, in many ways, a bit of a pussycat, and I don't think people necessarily realize that. So what I often find is when I talk to my senior team, for instance, or the teachers, and I explain what people think outside, especially my senior team will say, no, that's ridiculous. You always listen to us. You're always asking for our advice. You always, but people don't understand that necessarily outside because they only see a particular projected image, which is projected by the media, and I'm not really in control of that.
Yeah. And so coming on to, I suppose this links into this, but what do you think your biggest weakness or your fatal flaw is? What's your...
Well, it's funny because if people ever ask me that, or if I say to my senior team all the time that they need to watch out for me, that I can be quite, and people won't believe this, but I can be very trusting and a little naive. That is my biggest weakness. And
Okay.
so the reason why I tell my senior team that is because I need them to look out, to have my back on the things that I'm not very good at. And what I mean by being trusting, I trust people. I naturally trust people.
Yeah.
Personally and professionally.
Yeah.
I naturally trust them.
Yeah.
And so, one of the things I pride myself on is trusting my teachers, and trusting, I trust them with a lot of responsibility to be able to do what needs to be done. And some people might say, oh, well, Catherine, sometimes you might trust them too much, and I can be a bit naive in that I don't expect people to be working in such a way to do me over or to try and take advantage of me. I just trust that people are nice. And that isn't always the case. And so I do need to kind of remind myself not to be so trusting. And so I tell my senior team and watch out for that. But you know what? I have to remind myself, but I also quite like being trusting because it just means that you're a happier person. You're not suspicious of everybody. And I also forget things. Like when I say forget, I don't hold grudges. Like I don't really remember. I don't remember. I mean, maybe it's because I'm getting old, but I really don't remember anything. So it just means I don't have much weighing me down all the time. I just kind of move on.
Yeah.
In fact, you and I had a conversation about that. I was like, look, people apologize, boom, forget about it. It's like it hasn't happened. And I just feel it's a nice way to just to lighten the load as you go through life.
Yeah, makes sense.
Okay.
Obviously to focus on weaknesses would be a little bit one-sided. So what do you think your biggest strength is then?
Well, I'm a bit of a dog with a bone. So, and I've always been like that. This school is an example of that. We were knocked back so many times. It took us 3 years, more than 3 years, to find a building and open up. We tried to open in Lambeth, then we tried Wandsworth. We finally opened in Brent. Each time we were shut down. We had families who wanted to come to the school. I was out in the rain and in the snow handing out flyers, going into doctors' offices and mosques and churches and so on. And you do all of that, and then it's shut down, and then you think, oh my goodness, we have to start again somewhere else. And it took so long. But I'm not the kind of person who gives up easily. I just keep going. And I'm always saying to the kids at assembly and so on, when you fall down, you pick yourself up, you keep on going. I do think that's the number one thing that helps successful people succeed, is that they keep on going.
Resilience.
Yeah.
Kind of.
Yeah, well, being resilient, but also you continue to pursue the goal. Now, it's true that sometimes you might look and think, you know what, this is actually the wrong goal. And you change your mind and decide to pursue a different goal, fine. I'm not saying you have to be blind and tunnel-visioned about something.
Yeah.
You obviously want to take on board suggestions and advice and so on.
Yeah.
But I do think that people too often just give up on situations. People give up on their jobs, they give up on their relationships, they give up on their friendships, they give up, especially nowadays in the 21st century. It's all just cha-cha-cha, move. Once upon a time, people...
Is that because of choices? Because there's more choice?
There's a lot more choice. And I just think a lot of us, well, we're slightly spoiled. I don't know, head teachers who move schools all the time. I opened up Michaela. Am I going anywhere? No. I'm not going anywhere because it would be wrong to do so. I mean, I suppose I could earn more money.
Wrong?
Because I have a duty to the families, to the staff, and to the idea of Michaela. I have committed myself to something to demonstrate that this can be done. And just because somebody offers me more money or some job that looks a bit more glamorous, it's that sense of duty, I think, that often we've kind of lost in life. It's something we teach the children, duty to other people. Notice I'm talking about I have a duty to all these people to see this through and to build something.
Yeah.
I signed up for it, and I think too often we're just motivated by our own desires. I want more money, I want to go on holidays more often, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And I suppose I believe in self-sacrifice sometimes for a bigger goal. And our goal here is for the kids here, but also to have impact on the wider educational community.
Yes.
And if I just left that to go on earn some money doing something else, when I get to 85 and I'm on my deathbed, I wouldn't be able to look back and be proud of what I'd done.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense. So your school days, awesome or terrible?
So when I was at school, you mean? I would say they were pretty terrible. And they were terrible because I was really tall.
Yeah.
And I was really skinny.
Yeah.
And I also, well, for some time I was the only black kid in the school that I was at. And this was the 1980s. So things were pretty racist. I was growing up in Canada at this time. And, you know, the 1980s were pretty racist. So that was hard.
Yeah.
And then, you know, like we'd have little school dances and things. And of course I would sit there because nobody would even think about asking me to dance because, you know, I wasn't a human being. I mean, like, not that they said that.
Oh, come on.
But when I was like a giraffe, you know, seriously, I was just so different that it just wasn't, and that might sound odd now, because in 2019, people don't think like that, but in the 1980s, definitely, I was just different, and so, you know, and not to mention names you get called and that kind of thing, about something, but, so then, there's that, and then I went to a school where there were, you know, different groups. So there were the Indian kids, there were the black kids, there were these kind of cliques of kids. And because I suppose I'm mixed race, you know, my father's Indian Guyanese, my mother is black Jamaican, I didn't really fit into any one of these groups. And so I had this Polish friend and another friend who came from Chile. Yeah. And they were my two friends because they didn't fit in anywhere either. You know, like, they were hard.
So it was tough. That is what you're saying.
And I was a hardworking girl who things didn't. I wish I'd gone to school like Michaela. You know, like you just got bullied, and it was horrible. I mean, schools. I mean, I just went to normal state schools. You got bullied. If I'd been at a school like Michaela, I would have really thrived.
Yeah. No, that's sad but happy, I suppose, in some ways.
Yeah.
What's your number one biggest pet peeve? What's the thing that kind of drives you a bit bonkers?
Yeah.
Shall we say? Just move that.
Yeah, sure. I don't like the way people who aren't teachers think they know it all about teaching. It really annoys me. Yeah. Especially on Twitter. Drives me crazy. You know, all these people who don't know anything about teaching, telling me what should happen in a school or how I should do my job. And I always think, so I've been doing this for over 20 years. You don't know anything about schools, but because you think you went to a school, you then know better than I do. And I hate how they don't ask questions. And they don't ask me. I'm often at some dinner party or something, and somebody starts telling me what's wrong with state education. And I always find it extraordinary. I look at them and I think, look, not only am I been doing this a long time, I write about this, I'm interviewed about this, why are you not asking me any questions? And I think that's because, sadly, teaching isn't considered to be a profession. We aren't respected. It makes me really annoyed that we aren't, because it is the most difficult job in the world. You know, if you run a shoe shop, your clients who come to buy shoes want to be there, right?
Yeah.
And they come in, they buy the shoes, and then they leave. And that's all you have to do is provide them with some shoes and have some good service and so on, right? In a school, it is so complex. And that is why so many people who are not teachers, who when they then try and set up a school, it fails, because they think it's just like running any old business. Yeah. And it is so not like running any old business. It's so much more challenging, which is, of course, why I love it. But the fact is, it is really hard both to run a great school and to teach well.
Yeah, agreed. So what's your, if you were to say one personality trait in people that you don't have any time for, what would it be? What would the personality trait be?
Well, I can't remember. Maybe you told me this before, and I can't really remember. I don't know. I mean, there's not one you pick. I tend to work with people. Whatever I try and, I mean, I'll be clear about what I always say I don't suffer fools gladly, so I'm very clear with people when I don't, wait a minute, no, you got to be, honest about that and sensible about this, and conversations with me go down a certain line, but whoever I'm speaking to. But there's no one particular personality trait. I mean, no, I wouldn't say there is one.
Okay, that's fine. We don't have to go over that one. Comfortable silences or non-stop conversation?
Yeah, well, I mean, I talk a lot, obviously. So I suppose I would say non-stop conversation. I mean, look, it's not like I seek out non-stop conversation, but I do talk a lot. I always feel like there's so much that needs to be said because you need to explain it. And because I'm a teacher, I tend to repeat myself to people, you know. So that just in case you haven't heard me, let me just say that again in a different way, you know. I talk a lot.
Yeah, that's fine. And what's better, in your opinion, being fair or being nice?
Well, I mean, of course, Michaela's all about the idea of being fair, right? The idea, and in fact, I would argue that being fair is to be nice. And it's actually just you're kidding yourself if you think being nice is possible if you're not being fair, right? Being nice in the moment, oh, little Johnny, it's okay, you didn't do your homework, I'll let you go. Well, it might feel nice, but it isn't actually nice. You are hurting Johnny in the long run. Whereas if you're fair to Johnny and to Amy, one did their homework, one didn't, and then, you know, David also didn't do his homework, and both Johnny and David get the detention. You're being fair, you're being nice to them because you're helping them meet the standards that Amy has already achieved in doing her homework.
Yeah. I'm going to be unfair on you now, Kath. I'm going to ask you what your most embarrassing moment as a teacher was, or has been so far.
Yeah, well, it was when I was... Well, I mean, there's lots of embarrassing moments, aren't there? And in fact, I'm not quite sure if I should tell this story because it's so embarrassing, especially as the strictest headmistress in Britain and all that. You know, when I was... Because I was young once, right? So, and I was, I don't know, my first year teaching, I suppose. And, actually, I don't even know if I can say this.
Just say it. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. There's only 17 people.
Right. Okay.
It's us and 17 people. They won't mind.
Well, so I had this pair of trousers, and I don't know, like the back of the trousers had kind of split a little bit. And I was working in this boys' school, and I was wearing this kind of pair of sparkly underpants.
Sparkly?
Yeah, they were sparkly. The point is, you could see the sparkly bits kind of through.
Okay.
And I remember going to the billboard or whatever, you know, the bulletin board at the back of the room, and I was putting things on, and I remember all the boys turning around and looking at me, and I didn't really understand what was going on. And then many times throughout the day, you know, I'd bend over for something, and I could feel the boys looking, and I couldn't understand what was going on. And it wasn't until later in the evening when I went home and I saw them, and I was so embarrassed. It was awful. So yeah,
it's not bad. It's not bad. I'll give you that one. That's decent. What do you think, I suppose on a more serious note or somber note, what do you think the hardest thing about being a teacher is?
I think it's a real emotional roller coaster. I think every day you can feel like you've been pummeled, even if you're in a great school where everything is working really well.
Yeah.
Just because you're constantly spinning plates and you're dealing with people, children. And it's not even people, you're dealing with children.
Yeah.
And children there's a wide range of emotions constantly throughout the day from the kids. Some are angry, some are happy, some are, you know, feeling sad because something's happened at home, whatever, various reasons. And you're having to manage that with so many of them all of the time. I also think that if you're a really committed teacher who wants to change the lives of the kids that you're with, you give everything, you know. You give everything in a way that you might not do if you're working for McKinsey. You know, at the end of the day, well, some client doesn't get something perfect, who cares? Whereas with these kids, it's their lives that you have in the palm of your hands, and you're trying to help them make something of that life. And so you invest a lot of yourself. And I know teachers often will say, you know, when they're outside of school, I don't just mean here, I mean all teachers I know, you know, on the weekend, they're looking at things, oh, I could use that for my class. Oh, this would be a good idea for them. And
it's an investment.
You're just always invested, yeah.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. I'd agree. I think I've written a lot about the performance aspect of teaching, and that to me, that's the hardest bit, is the kind of performative nature of it. Yeah, the 6 hours a day, and which is different from a lot of jobs.
And people don't realise. So people in office jobs, they say, I remember, you know, my friends in the days when I would go out, you know, in the weekdays, they'd say, oh, we're going out to this bar or whatever. And I would say, well, I'm not going, obviously, because I've got to go to work in the morning. Yeah. And they'd say, but why? What is wrong with you, Catherine? Why are you the only one not coming? All of us are going out. And I'd say, because I teach. It's a different thing.
And do you feel that here at Michaela, do you feel that you have a handle on workload? I mean, do you feel that you...
Yeah, we definitely have a handle on workload, but
is it impossible? I suppose what I'm saying is it impossible in the UK at the moment? I
think anywhere.
In anywhere, possibly.
I think it's the nature of teaching. So yes, we have a handle on workload. Yes, people aren't planning on their own here. It's centralized. They're all sharing the resources and the detentions. So there's all sorts of things that we do that reduces workload. But in terms of the energy that's required in front of the class when you teach, that is something that's just the nature of teaching.
And would you say that you talk about the energy there, the teaching style here, the way in which the teachers teach?
Yeah.
Do you think that requires more energy?
It's true. I think it does. I think if you're leading the classroom, then it does require more energy. Now, our teachers will teach less as a result, because we're aware of that, so they don't have such a heavy timetable.
Right.
But yeah, I think...
that's not a bad... I personally, I quite enjoy, teaching from the front. I enjoy it, but it is taxing.
It does take a lot
in terms of...
definitely.
Okay, so... what's your philosophy? I mean, we're touching on this now a bit, but what's your philosophy when it comes to behaviour? Because I know that's where some of the controversies have come from in terms of Michaela. It's strict. It's almost beyond strict in some people's views. I mean, what is the philosophy? What is the philosophy on behaviour?
Yeah, well, you saw them at break time.
I have seen it, yes.
You saw them at break time. They're just normal kids playing basketball and ping pong and so on. It's all perfectly normal. People say that because, oh my goodness, we've got silent corridors. Well, it just means they move really quickly to their lessons and nobody's shoving each other and punching each other.
The bit I've seen, folks, hello. I'll turn to the camera. The bit I saw this morning was the bit with at the end of break.
Yeah.
And the bit that, the teacher blew the whistle and literally you couldn't hear a pin drop from I don't know how many, it must have been a couple of hundred students or something there.
Yeah.
And that doesn't happen in a lot of schools. So I suppose I'm saying how, okay, systems, yes, but there must be something more to it. I know we had a conversation before we started the live stream about this, is how, how?
How?
Yeah.
How do you make that the behaviour systems work?
That much, to that degree?
Well, you need all your staff to buy into it, and then you need to over-narrate everything all of the time to staff. So you're telling them at briefing, you're telling them at CPD, you're telling them via email, you're getting heads of department to reiterate and heads of year, and so you can't say it enough times. And then you make sure that everybody's just trained in the same kind of way so that everybody knows what the expectation is. You also make sure that the kids buy into it so that they all know, well, why is it, so when that whistle goes and they all go quiet, it's because they all buy in to the idea that I want a good education and I want to be in a school where I'm not going to get shoved around and bullied and so on.
Yeah.
And I want to get to my lesson quickly because I want to learn, because I'm engaged with my learning. That's the other key thing, is that the quality of the teaching needs to be excellent, because children will happily behave as long as they are learning.
How do you know, obviously testing and so on, but how do you know that a student, for example, let's say I'm teaching it and it's a teacher-led lesson, there might be engagement and there might be passive compliance, and it's incredibly difficult, in my opinion, to see the difference between the two. And and you might have 3 times during this. You might have someone who's an exceptionally gifted child who is passive but might do well in tests. So I'm saying, how do you measure that? How do you know that it's...
Well, tests are key. So and you're having constant low-stake quizzes every week, right? So we do that every single week in every subject. They're doing a low-stakes quiz, and that means the teacher's able to check. Though when it gets to Key Stage 4, for instance, in order to do well on that quiz, you have to have done 2-3 hours of work to prepare for it to be able to do it. So, it's not just recalling. You're not recalling facts. Those aren't our quizzes. And that tells you right then, because the problem with homework is that, well, they can cheat on that, especially nowadays. They have a WhatsApp group. One person writes the essay, everybody's copying it out. It's a waste of time. So actually, you need to have quizzes, and that needs to be every single week. But also,
but you like homework. You do like homework.
Yeah,
you like the idea of homework.
But we know they're cheating, right? So we're always trying to find ways. Okay, well, how can we make sure that we've got them doing the work? So, and then, what were we saying?
Passive active.
Yeah. So in the actual lesson, you need to check for understanding constantly.
Yeah.
So we do turn to your partner. We might do that 20, 30 times in a lesson, where we ask the question, turn to your partner, blah, 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 and then they turn back. Right, hands up.
Yes.
And then we always also have a rule. If you don't have 80% of the kids' hands up, then there's a problem, right? You've done something wrong, right? Because everybody should know this answer, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, and of course that's the culture of the school. So the hands are always up because they're used to understanding and then being able to contribute in the lesson.
That makes perfect sense. And I know that slant has got some kind of bad press, in terms of I've read about it. I know what it is. Why do you think it's got some bad press?
I genuinely don't know. It just means that you're sitting up straight. You and I are sitting up straight, right?
Well,
know.
I'm not slanting very well here, Catherine.
Well, I mean, look, that's an exaggeration. So obviously we're not sat like that because that would be ridiculous.
Yeah.
But we're also not like this, right?
Yeah.
And that's how kids are, right?
Yeah.
Certainly all the kids I've ever taught,
Yeah.
perhaps at some top private school they're not like that, but
Yeah.
certainly in my entire career, the kids are naturally horizontal. You have to be able to teach them to sit up straight. Why are their hands? The point about slant is that their hands are up here. Now, frankly, it could be like
so
that.
So they're on the
this.
desk.
And why do you want them on the desk? Because otherwise, they're jabbing so-and-so with a pencil underneath. They're doing all sorts of things. Have their hands up there and you don't have any of those issues. And what happens when they're jabbing? Oh, miss, or boom. And then you have to throw those kids out and then they fall behind. And oh, guess what? It's the two kids who come from socioeconomic backgrounds that aren't the same as the rest of the class. And then they fall behind even further and so on. So you want to be fair and nice? Slant. Right?
Yeah. Okay. And that explains, I think, a lot of the philosophy on behaviour. But if I was to just say two words to you, and then you can give you kind of one word reaction to it: mobile phones.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm very much against
one word
phones.
reaction.
One word, no. Just say no. I mean, look, we sell brick phones at a loss, so they cost us £14. We sell them for £10. There's a reason for that. I also bought a big safe to put their phones in, and their PS4s and their Xboxes and so on. Now, why would I do that? I've invested all of this time and money into this whole program of digital detox, we call it, because it's the number one thing that's going to stop your child, as I say to the parents, it's going to stop your child from succeeding, because they will spend 6 hours quite happily on social media. And they have the WhatsApp groups where they're all copying each other's homework. So your child's never doing any homework. It's having their brain broken by beep, beep, beep all the time, so they have no way of following through with concentration span and following that narrative arc. They can't do it. Also, every pedophile that's out there, every gang member that's out there knows where your child lives, knows their route to work or to school, knows all their friends, knows what they like to do, and then they get involved. I have seen this with my own eyes. They get involved in all sorts of groups out there, especially when you're in the inner city or in a place like us. It is very dangerous.
Do you encourage parents to moderate mobile phone use as well? I mean, do you take an active role in that?
For them, you mean? For their own phones?
Yeah. I mean,
No.
do you
I don't
you
say
don't,
anything
you
about
just,
the parents'
no.
own use, but I do speak constantly about them. Screen time is something that we help them put on their iPhone, so they perhaps might only use it for an hour.
Oh no, but I don't mean the school telling the parents. I mean, do you encourage the parents to use the same ethos as Michaela at home with mobile devices?
Constantly.
Yeah.
I give parenting lessons, as it were, and the number one thing I talk about is how to negotiate this world of technology, because of course we set homework online. So then the parent needs to know, okay, when they're on the computer, they will minimize Heggerty maths and maximize, Fortnite when the parent isn't there.
Yeah.
Parent comes back, click, very quickly, it looks like they're doing the Heggerty maths. So I'm explaining all of that to parents. One of the big problems parents have is that they're not very tech savvy.
Yeah.
So the kids are, the parents don't really know, and the kids are just running rings around them. I would say, especially for disadvantaged kids, it's the most important thing. Schools that have phones in them, I mean, I just don't understand what they're doing. I genuinely think they're letting children down.
You don't think there's space there for, because of the benefits of tech apps, whatever.
No, it's madness.
Yeah.
Absolute madness.
Yeah, that's that.
Right.
When I suppose this is more about teachers and teachers watching, maybe, who are thinking, what, I would quite like to work at a school like Michaela, for example. What is your perfect interview candidate? Your perfect teacher, if you were to clone them.
I always look for two things. How clever they are and how enthusiastic they are. Those are the two things. I always think if you've got those two things, for any job, frankly, not just teaching, caretakers, office staff, whoever, if they're bright and if they're enthusiastic, you got to make.
I mean, do you agree with, I know that the philosophy of the government in recent years has been to, if you like, say, okay, we want teachers to have, I don't know, first class, I don't know, whatever,
when I say
masters,
bright,
first class, and so on.
When I say bright, because notice I talk about the caretakers, or I talk about kitchen staff and so on, I mean sharp. I mean that you're on it. You see things, you know.
Yes.
We've just hired a caretaker. He was so great. He was so great when he came for interview.
I think I've just met him downstairs, actually.
Yeah, probably.
In the yard.
He's so great. I mean, he was talking about the lessons and the teachers and what he'd seen.
Yeah.
And he was saying how there's the same routines from classroom to classroom. And I was thinking, this man is having a first, right?
Yeah, yeah.
This is about being switched on. And he was switched on. And I want people who are switched on and on it. Because when there's something, that's one of the difficult things about teaching. You're getting things are thrown at you constantly that are a bit that are a bit different.
Yeah.
That, you've got to be on the ball to
Agreed.
be able to jump at it, right?
Agreed.
So, yeah, that's what I look for.
Agreed. And I suppose moving on to social media, because I know I want to say thanks for backing me up on Listgate. That was much appreciated.
So
but
mad.
what are your things about Twitter? Because obviously you're a prominent personality on social media there. What's the thing you like about it the most, and what's the thing you hate about it the most? Twitter.
Yeah, well, it's funny you say I'm prominent, because for the first couple of years when we opened, I wasn't on Twitter at all. And I hated it because I had so much abuse. I couldn't take it. So I wasn't on it. But then I realized that there was a real vacuum out there in terms of the school, and that I was not the face of the school. And I can't let that happen. So I'm now very much the face of the school. Yeah. And I've put a lot of work into making that happen by commenting on Twitter. And it has been wonderful in many ways. I have met people that I wouldn't otherwise have met. I have had advice. The other day, my laptop wasn't working, and I tweeted about it. And all of these people from all over the world were giving me advice about what to do. It was just so kind. It was lovely. So I see real kindness through Twitter. And plus, I find like-minded people.
Yeah.
Who I can connect with and who get what I'm saying. And when you're saying things that are a bit controversial, it's really nice to know that there's a whole bunch of people out there who do support your ideas. So there's that. I mean, what I don't like about Twitter is when people can be really rude and horrible. I just don't see any need for that. I just don't get it. I mean, what happened to you, for instance, with Listgate? I find it so unacceptable. I find it so unbelievable that this is what people are doing. And of course, similar things have happened to us with the school.
Yes.
It's just appalling behaviour. And what is really sad is that these people call themselves tolerant when they are the most intolerant people out there.
Yeah. I mean, I should probably mention at this point because I've blogged on this is kind of being a conservative, being a conservative in education.
Why are you one?
According to the thing that you fill in with the box,
Yeah.
I would say I'm bang in the middle.
Right.
Catherine, I'm quite a pragmatist.
Right.
I voted for, I think, 4 different political parties in the last 4 elections since I've been 18.
Right.
Right now, I'm struggling. I'm struggling to see who I can vote for. Really,
Oh, I see.
I'm in a bit of a yes.
Right.
But do you think that's been? I mean, do you think that's been difficult with being a conservative and being a?
Well, I want to make it clear I am not a conservative, right? That's a big C conservative you're talking about, because you're talking about voting in political parties.
Yeah.
I could easily not vote Conservative. I mean,
yeah.
I'm not a paid member of the Conservative Party.
Yeah.
I'm not a Conservative. I am a
So
small
why have
C.
you been associated?
Well, I'm a small C Conservative, so my values are very small C Conservative.
Yeah.
I have to say, I think many members of the Conservative Party are not small C Conservatives, right? And there are some, Kate Hoey, for instance, but a member of the Labour Party, she MP for Vauxhall, she's very much a small C Conservative. So you can be on the left. I don't know, there are people on Twitter, Michael Merrick, for instance, he's one that people know. He's more of a small C Conservative than I am, but he's a man of the left, Andrew Old is another one. Like, there are various people. It's not about political parties. It's about an outlook and.
So you're saying they're not left, but they're saying they're left, or are you saying?
No, I'm saying Michael Merrick is a man of the left who is a small C Conservative.
Okay.
You can be a small C Conservative, and in fact, there are many members of the Conservative Party, big C. Boris Johnson is not a small C Conservative. You can just tell by his personal life.
I think we can establish that from the outset, Catherine. I don't think you need to say that, really.
Yeah. So, like, I'm just saying, small c and big C, you got to distinguish when you're talking.
Yeah,
you know?
Okay. What's the worst thing about UK education for you at the moment? What's the thing about the UK?
I actually am feeling really positive.
You're feeling positive?
Yeah, I feel things are changing, and I'm feeling really happy about it. I mean, look, I wish things could go faster. I think there's far too much progressivism around. I think we need to fix those things. But, you know, I was a great fan of Michael Gove in the role of Education Secretary. So that was a bit sad for me when he stopped being Education Secretary, because I think he did a great job for education. But right now I'm feeling positive. I think things are moving forward. I think he made some good changes, which now need to embed, you know, with regard to the curriculum, with regard to exams.
Do you think though there were costs to Gove's changes in terms of the number of teachers who have left the profession since 2010?
I think that was always the case. There are always teachers. Teachers leave because of crazy behaviour. That is the number one reason. Not leaving because of Michael Gove. I mean, it's the most absurd thing I've ever heard. Teachers leave because of workload and because of behaviour. That is why, right? And that has nothing to do with Michael Gove or the Conservatives or the Labour Party or anybody. It's where teaching has been for some time, you know. And it's not to do with any political party. It is to do with a culture in our society which allows for excuses. And we just need to raise our standards as a profession. And that's not to do with political parties. We need to take responsibility on that.
Yeah, okay. And when people kind of talk about good leadership, or certainly being a visible leader, what does being a visible leader mean to you in a school?
People need to see you, you know. So, I mean, I've always been very much of the opinion that your deputies run your school, so they're marching up and down and doing everything.
Yeah.
I'm not the kind of head who's doing that.
Yes.
I don't want to be that. In fact, I regularly try and make myself small, you know, because if I'm the person marching around all the time, then I feel that I prevent my staff from growing, you know. I want them to be doing it all, and I'm just making things happen. I mean, once I was eating lunch with the kids, and one of the Year 8 boys said to me, no, Year 7 this was, because he just started, and he said to me, "Oh, miss, are you the headmistress?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Well, it doesn't feel like you're the headmistress." And I said, "Is that because I'm not in the yard kind of shouting and saying, 'Rah, follow me,' and so on?" And he said, yeah. I said, "Yeah, I can see why you feel that way. But trust me, I am. You know, I am the head.
Yeah.
I know what's going on,
yes.
But I don't have to be there going, 'Look at me, I'm in charge.'" But I do think, you know, I know what you mean about SLTs and schools that are just in their offices and they're never anywhere. But, I mean, this isn't that kind of school. It's just everybody's out there.
Yeah, and I know it's difficult. I think some people tweeted at me actually last night saying it's very difficult, and I acknowledge that. I don't think it's always easy actually for a head teacher to be constantly visible, because they get things happening all the time that they have to deal with.
I mean, I'm not. But my staff will see me. My door's always open.
Staff will see,
they're coming in all the time.
Yeah.
So it's different. I always say I'm there for the staff.
It's a
I'm
philosophy.
not there for the kids.
It's maybe a philosophy more than a tick box exercise of are you visible at certain times of the day. It's a philosophy to be. And I suppose that I think I've only got a couple of questions left.
Well,
yes.
My
yes.
are just
I would go last question.
Yes,
last question. How would you tackle bullying in the workplace? Because I think there's a lot of teachers out there who are either being bullied, have been bullied, and are thinking about leaving their schools because of bullying. So how would you go about that?
Well, I can't imagine that sort of thing happening here. I mean, we've just got a very nice culture.
Oh no, I don't mean here, but I mean if you went now to another school, and you were head in another school, and you were sure that there was some bullying going on, you know, how do you deal with that?
It would depend on the situation.
It would.
I mean, I would talk to people and say, well, what's going on here? We need to sort this out and get everybody in a room and you talk about it, right? I mean, the best thing is to just get everyone talking. I mean, that's always any situation where there are misunderstandings and so on. You just get everybody talking.
Bring them into the office.
And then,
that makes sense.
And lead. You know, the key thing is that there needs to be some leadership.
Yes. Yeah.
Katharine, 1 minute.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much indeed for taking all this time out to do this.